Throughout the course of the Civil War, various medical advancements needed to be developed in order for doctors and nurses to be able to effectively help those who were wounded in battle. Casualty rates skyrocketed with the introduction of the Minié ball and with the railroad being newly implemented into battle technique. Both the North and the South struggled to keep alive those who were wounded. At the time of the war, amputation was considered the most ideal medical procedure for treating bullet wounds that affected people's limbs. Amputations were most frequently used because surgeons found that amputating increased a soldier's likelihood of surviving. Arms and legs removed within 48 hours of injury were called primary amputations, and those removed 48 hours after were called secondary amputations. The mortality rate for primary amputations was 25%, but secondary amputation rate was twice as high. Surgeons learned that amputating the limb after it became infected actually caused the infection to spread, and patients frequently died. Generally, the higher up the amputation was in the body, the greater the chance was of the patient surviving. It is estimated that 3 out of every 4 soldiers survived an amputation. During surgery, ether and chloroform were commonly used as anesthetics, but supplies could not keep up with demand. Surgery was but a prelude to the horrors a soldier would face. Gangrene and other little understood infections swept through hospitals with deadly results. Surgical fevers were responsible for most of the deaths of amputees. Primitive as the conditions were, it is likely that the majority of amputees were saved by the saw. However, surgery had not yet progressed to an understanding of antiseptic conditions. A doctor would use the same knife and saw all day, wiping his hands and instruments on his apron when they became too slimy. Most surgeries were performed outside on operating tables made of doors laid upon boxes, with tubs underneath to catch the blood. An experienced surgeon could remove a limb in a few minutes. For example, some surgeons at Gettysburg did nothing for an entire week but cut off arms and legs from dawn until twilight. The men who survived the surgeon's knife were a visible reminder of the Civil War for decades to come. Civil War surgeons almost always had chloroform to anesthetize patients before an amputation. The chloroform was dripped onto a piece of cloth held over the patient's face until he was unconscious. Although it was not an exact science, the procedure worked well, and few patients died from overdose. Opium pills, opium dust, and injections were also available to control post-operative pain. Kate Cumming, an Alabama nursing volunteer, writes in her journal about conditions in the Confederate Army Hospital Service, 1862. A young man whom I have been attending is going to have his arm cut off. Poor fellow. I am doing all that I can to cheer him. He says that he knows that he will die, as all who have had limbs amputated in the hospital have died. Our men do not seem to stand half a chance as the Northerners. Nursing volunteer Louisa May Alcott reports to readers at home about her experiences with the Union Army, 1863. The first thing I met was a regiment of the vilest odors that ever assaulted the human nose, and took me by storm. In they came, some on stretchers, some in men's arms, some feebly staggering along propped on rude crutches, and one lay stark and still with a covered face, as a comrade gave his name to be recorded before they carried him away to the dead house. The sight of several stretchers, each with its legless, armless, or desperately wounded occupant entering my ward, admonished me that I was there to do work, not to wonder or weep, so I corked up my feelings and returned to the path of duty. In June 1861, the United States Sanitary Commission was created to help oversee and organize the women's war effort. It was organized, run, and funded by civilians. It was created to help improve the sanitary conditions of hospitals and cities. It was also created because of the daunting statistics. For every man killed in battle during the war, 2 died from disease. Such diseases included dysentery, diarrhea, typhoid, and malaria. Over the 4 years of fighting, a total of about 560,000 men died of disease. One of the major ways the United States Sanitary Commission supported the war effort was to hold large fundraisers called sanitary fairs. Sanitary fairs were public events that included exhibitions, plays, parades, and concerts. The first sanitary fair was held in Chicago, Illinois, from October 27 to November 7, 1863, and it raised nearly $100,000. In addition to sanitary fairs, the Sanitary Commission agents inspected Army hospital conditions, organized physicians and nurses for hospitals and hospital shifts, and created soldiers' homes. After the war, the Commission helped Union Army veterans secure their back pay and apply for pensions. Medical treatment during the Civil War is a prime example of how little people knew of disease and wound care during the 19th century. Doctors and nurses struggled to keep patients alive because of the lack of medical knowledge. Varying access to supplies gave Northern soldiers the ability to receive better medical treatment than Southerners did. All in all, the Civil War was a learning period for doctors and nurses who had never been faced with such war wounds before. The medical advancements and procedures that were developed assisted medical personnel in saving thousands of men who were injured in the Civil War.